Hi, I'm Rob. Welcome to Hobby Phase, part of the 5th Trooper network. Today we're going to be building and painting a customizable rebel officer for Star Wars Legion. If you enjoy the content that 5th Trooper's putting out, please do consider joining our Patreon, links in the description below. The kit, as with all these AMG kits, has gone together really easily. I had the tiniest little bit of mould cleanup to do on, I think it was his thigh. Other than that, barely anything to do other than clip the parts out that I wanted and glue it all together with some Tamiya Ultra Thin. I went for a Duros head when building the kit for two reasons. One is I think it's cool because if you've got the option to do an alien, you probably should. And the other is from a painting point of view, it allows us to add a little more colour into our miniatures and a little more variety into our army. I'll be honest, I've struggled and fought this miniature a little bit. My first struggle was choosing two right arms to put on him. In the end I did find a left arm and I've just gone for him with a pointing pose. There are loads and loads of arm options in the kits with various guns and pointing and even a big axe you can have. I prime him with the zenithal highlight, that's painting him black all over and then using a white, I do it through the airbrush but you can do it with a rattle can from above. This gives us a little pre-shading and it allows me to see the shapes of the miniatures. In terms of colour scheme, I couldn't quite get one in my head for this. I couldn't find an example of the armour in canon. So I've decided to go for a black undersuit, keep it quite neutral, and then I'm going to paint the armour white as if he's managed to liberate it from the Empire. It's some sort of, I don't know, experimental armour they've managed to rob. So to paint the undersuit, I start off with some Tenebrous grey from AK Interactive. I'm thinning it down with a lot of water to allow the zenithal to do a little bit of work for us in terms of highlighting and shading. Once that's on and dried, I start highlighting up by mixing in off-white with the Tenebrous grey. I'm not bothered about getting these blends super smooth. It is the undersuit, it is a little bit of background in our miniature really. And for some reason I always start painting his crotch. I'm really not sure what's going on there. You can see I'm keeping the highlights relatively scratchy, not bothered about smoothness. I mean, after all, it's material, it should look a bit rough. And I mix in increasing amounts of off-white as I brighten it up. On his leg, I really concentrate on the thigh. I want that forward thigh to be more highlighted so it draws the eye a little bit more. And with my final highlight, I stipple that on by making loads of little dots and random slashes, again just to give the material a little bit of texture. I find some random green paint and just dump that on his head so I've got an idea of the contrast as I go forward. On that left thigh, he's got what look like bandages to me. So to paint them up, I'm going to start off with a base coat of Dubai Brown by scale 75. I'm putting it on quite thin. I'm not bothered about getting it perfectly smooth because I'm going to cover up about 95% of it anyway. Then for the main colour of our bandages, I'm using Vampiric Flesh from AK Interactive. I'm painting over, as I say, about 95% of the brown. Really only leaving that brown in the recesses just to give us a bit of contrast so we can see the shape of them. And then for my first highlight I use Birch by scale 75, again thinned down a bit. I'm covering up about 50% of the Vampiric Flesh, all focused on the front of his leg where I want the eye to be drawn. And for the final highlight I go back to the off-white from AK and I do the very front of that thigh just to really draw the eye to that area. As I say, for the armour, I want it to look like stolen Imperial armour. A lot of the work's been done for us with the Zenithal Prime, so all I'm going to do to start off with is dump Apothecary White over all the armour panels. The contrast paint sits nicely in the recesses and gives us a slight blue hue to it. At this point the mini's looking a little stark for me. It's black and white, it's a bit boring. All my rebels have NMM bases that I freehand. I'll show that later in the video, but they have a blue hue to them and I want the model to have blue in the shadows. So I've decided to do a universal shade over the whole miniature. And to do that I'm putting some Drakenhoff Nightshade thinned down with quite a bit of airbrush thinner, and I'm putting that through the airbrush and shooting from underneath, kind of an anti-zenithal, and that'll help give a little blue hue to most of the model. You can see it colours up those armour panels quite nicely and gives a little blue to that grey undersuit. And then it's back to the armour. I've put a little blue-grey on the palette. I haven't got any footage of me using this, but I did use it just to correct a couple of mistakes, because with the Drakenhoff Nightshade and the Apothecary white, it comes out that blue-grey colour anyway. And all I'm doing for the armour at this point is thinning down some off-white and glazing it over towards the top of the armour panels to give us the highlights we want. And I take a few passes at that each time. Because I'm working with the paint quite thin, I work in a slightly smaller area to focus the highlight. And then to increase the shadows and increase the contrast on the armour panels, I'm taking that wash again, the Drakenhoff Nightshade, and very, very carefully painting it into all the edges and all the recesses. I don't want to use it as a traditional wash, it's more to glaze in the shadows. Then more off-white, thin down again, keep highlighting up until I've got it to a point I'm happy with. And that's the armour done, really simple. Doesn't take too long, just requires a little bit of patience. To get the skin tone right, I think it's good to have a little bit of a reddish colour in there, as if it suggests that blood is flowing around the body. So I'm going to mix in some of this purpley colour. It's called Sanguine Base by P3. They stopped making it years ago, but just a few months ago they re-released the range, so you can go out and pick it up should you want to. And I'm mixing that in with some dark green from AK to give us a slightly unusual greenish tone that I'm going to base coat the whole face in. As usual, I leave the eyes in the eye area because we're going to paint the eyes in next. And I'm using that Sanguine Base as the base coat of the eyes. I get my bristles to a nice fine point and just very carefully paint in the eye. And I am trying to get really good coverage here because this is a base colour that I will be going over. Then the main red colour I'm going to use for his eyes is another P3 paint. Again, they've re-released it. It's called Khador Red Base. It's a nice vibrant red colour. It glazes beautifully. Really like this paint. And we're going to dot that in the centre of the eye. I say dot, we're trying to cover up about 75% of the eye, but when you're working on something that small, it's always a dot. And then my final highlight in the eyes, it's not a pupil, Duros don't have pupils, but they have like a brighter section in the middle of the eye. So I'm going to mix a little sunny skin tone in with the red and highlight that into the middle of the eye. I think I didn't get the colour quite right, it wasn't quite smooth enough for me, so just go back in with some of that red, thin down with a lot of water so that I can glaze over it. That'll bring the colour, mute it down ever so slightly, as well as blend it for us. When I'm doing this, it's important you wick a lot of the paint off of the brush. You don't want to wash it in, you want to glaze it over. And then I'm just correcting any little mistakes, painting in his eyelids in more of that dark green. Our first highlight colour is going to be called Deep Green, and there's nothing confusing about that at all. Especially as it's not actually that deeper green colour. I thin it down quite a bit, and I'm putting all the highlights towards the top of his head, the top of his features. I want people to be able to see the shape of this. You know, we are playing with 32mm models from a couple of feet away, so we're going to go quite extreme with our highlights here. Then I mix in some sunny skin tone to the deep green to brighten it right up and bring in a little natural skinish colour in there. And to do these highlights, I stipple a lot of them in. I'm not using glazing, although I am using it at a glaze consistency. And I'm doing a lot of little dashes and dots and slashes and all that sort of thing to make his skin look like it's got texture, to make it feel a bit more real. And then effectively I repeat that step, covering up slightly less area, but this time with the pure sunny skin tone. At this point I've mixed feelings about the model. Quite happy how he looks in terms of his paint job, but it doesn't feel very Star Wars to me at the moment. Here I've taken some of the deep green and thinned it right down to a glaze consistency with water to smooth out some of the transitions on the model. It's important when you're doing this to wick any excess moisture off of the brush so you're not washing the model, just glazing it. And I'll do the same with the Sanguine Base right at the bottom of his neck and underside of his head. Again, I want a bit of that red hue in, it suggests blood flow and it also gives us a really good contrast. He has a few details about him, some sort of bands on his arms and legs. I wasn't really sure what colour to do these, so I decided to do them in the same colours as his eyes, hoping it would give us a nice trilogy of that colour scheme over the course of the model. So I start off base coating it in the Sanguine Base, highlighting up through the Khador Red, and then glazing in some sunny skin tone as a final highlight. As a way of painting red, I was really happy with this. It came out really nicely. It didn't feel right on the model to me, and I've decided to include it because I promised myself I'd include all my painting, warts and all, with these parts. And here we are. He looks okay at the moment. He doesn't feel Star Wars, and I wasn't really sure what to do with him, so I put him away for a few weeks, came back to it after painting an Imperial officer, and decided to repaint all of those details. They just weren't sitting right with me, so I've decided to go with the blue theme. I'm going to start off with some dark Prussian blue and cover up all of that red. As soon as I've put those first few brush strokes on, I feel better about the model. It just feels more cohesive this way. We're going for some colder colours. The red didn't belong there. So once the dark Prussian blues on, I highlight up with some light Prussian blue. And then I'm going to mix in some off-white with the light Prussian blue just to give a final highlight on there. I also do a little edge highlight on it with just the off-white, if memory serves right. This instantly made the model feel much more cohesive and together. I actually went and did his belt and other leather parts in the same colours. To do his blaster, I'm going to use more or less the same colour palette. I've base coated it in jet black, and then I'm going to glaze over that some dark Prussian blue over quite a lot of it. You can hardly see it, but it does again continue that blue theme that we've got going throughout the rest of the model. You want to be careful when you're painting something that's black, especially something like a blaster, which would be painted matte black, to not highlight it too much and make it look grey. So I keep my highlights very small here, and I go in with some light blue grey and just gently dot it over most of the model so that we can see the shapes as a viewer, but we still assume it's a black blaster. And then I go over those highlights again, just the tiniest little edge highlights here and there in the off-white. Again, more contrast, but trying to keep it looking black. And then I've decided to go back into the face. I was enjoying how it looked, but I wanted to add more texture to it. I was really pleased with the way that stippling had come along. I just wanted more of it. So I've mixed together some of the deep green, sunny skin tone, and I thin it down to a glaze consistency and stipple it. So I guess we're doing stipple glazing here. If you're interested in that technique, there's a painter called Phoenix Miniature Art on YouTube who paints most models this way and does the most stunning work. And I just keep mixing in increasing amounts of sunny skin tone to get the highlights up, and I actually stipple over all his skin, focusing the brighter colours on the parts I want to be brighter and draw the eye towards. I'm really happy with that. It's got so much more contrast and more texture in now. As I've got the paints out, I've decided to have a go at doing a little freehand on his shoulder, try and tie him into the theme of my army. So I've gone for some Ahsoka style markings. I've done the same on my AO5 speeder truck. She's one of my favourite characters in Star Wars. Unfortunately, I did mess up some of the video footage of this and recorded loads of it off camera by accident. Effectively, the process is to go in with some of the dark Prussian blue, very, very thinned down so that it flows nicely off the brush. Any mistakes I make them corrected with some off-white and some light blue-grey until I've got it looking how I want it to look. Now for the base. The bases in my rebel army are a bit of a mission. I might regret choosing to do this for quite a large army. And I freehand all of them. So my first step is to pop him off. I'd only put him on with a dot of super glue, it cracks off quite easily. Next, I'm going to sand off all the texture on the base so it's completely smooth, making it a much easier surface to freehand onto. Whilst you're watching me do this, I'm going to take the opportunity to remind you of the 5th Trooper Network and our Patreon, links in the description below. My first step with the actual painting of it is to paint on the shape I want on it. I want it to look like some metal panels, probably inside a space station, that are maybe meeting up and overlapping. I try and get 3 panels, maybe 4 on each base I do, and put in a little interesting shape here and there. I don't want them over-complicated, but I do want them to look cool. And then the way I paint them is to wet blend them. I've tried various methods over the years, and this has always been my favourite. And I wet blend between the light blue-grey, the dark Prussian blue, and the Tenebrous grey. And you can see here, to wet blend, I'm trying to work very quickly. You're not going to believe it, I have sped that footage up, but I'm still trying to work quickly so that the paints will blend together nice and smoothly and create a nice, even and smooth transition. It takes a little bit of practice, this technique, but in my opinion it's one well worth getting down. It's great for all sorts of things. I really like it for fur, I like it for cloaks, and as you can see I like it for these bases. Once I've got my wet blends down and the shape's done, I'm going to go in and re-establish them with some intense black just to outline them. As soon as we do that, we can start seeing the contrast, see what the base is going to look like. It's starting to take shape. I do want to add a little bit of colour in, so I do a dark Prussian blue glaze, really, really thin here. You can see it's mostly water in the mix, and I'm going to just basically dump that over the middle of the wet blend, add a little bit of colour, smooth out some of the blending where it hasn't gone perfectly. I'm then going to edge highlight each of the panels using some off-white. This will really define the shapes for us, start making it look a little more metallic and a little bit more how I want it to look. I actually really enjoy this process. It's quite chill, it feels like real painting. It just requires a little bit of patience and a steady hand. It is boring when you've got a whole unit of them to do though. The final step, I take some blue-grey and I paint little scratches all over the texture. Once I've reattached the miniature, gives us a little bit of texture, hides any rough blends, gives a little bit of character. And that's him, finished. I'm pleased with how he's come out. I'm proud he's the leader of my army. I'm still not convinced he looks completely Star Wars. If you've enjoyed this video, do consider subscribing to the 5th Trooper on Patreon.